Careful, Della said, balancing the paper boat of strawberries against her hip. People will think we're dating. It was the kind of thing she said a dozen times a day without weighing it, the way she handed out sunscreen and reminders and small jokes, all of them meant to keep the morning light. She expected him to do what he always did. Let the corner of his mouth move a quarter inch and look back at his phone. Theo Lang did neither. He stopped on the warm planks of the boardwalk, in the smell of fried dough and lake water and somebody's coconut sunscreen, with the July heat coming up off the boards through the soles of her sandals, and he looked at her for a long second. "I hope they do," he said. For a moment the fair went on around them as if nothing had happened, a child shrieking on the carousel, a vendor calling out lemonade $2, a gull picking a fight with a discarded pretzel. Della felt the strawberries' green smell sharp in her nose and her own pulse louder than it had any business being. "That's not funny," she said, because saying it was easier than the alternative. "I wasn't trying to be." He said it plainly. He always said everything plainly. In 9 months she had never once heard him use sarcasm, as though it were a tool he'd been raised not to touch. Between them, gripping a fistful of each of their hands, Posey tugged. She was 4 3/4, and the 3/4 were non-negotiable, and right now her whole attention was fixed on a pony made of plastic, going up and down on a brass pole. Della, is the pony for true?" "As true as ponies get," Della said, grateful for the rescue. "Want a ride? Daddy too." "Daddy is too tall for ponies," Theo said. "He could try," Della said, and there it was, the thing she did, the small joke laid down like a plank over water. Imagine the photo, $1 billion, and his knees up by his ears. And that was when the photo happened. Not the imaginary one. A real one. A woman a few feet away with a phone held up, framing the carousel, or the lake behind it, or maybe the three of them, the tall man and the laughing nanny, and the little girl swinging between their hands. Della saw the lens catch the sun. She told herself it was the carousel. She told herself a lot of things that summer. "Come on, troublemaker," she said to Posey, and steered them toward the ticket booth, the strawberries warming and softening in their paper boat, the boards radiating heat, and behind her she could feel Theo not moving for one beat longer than he should have. As if the sentence he'd said had cost him something and he was waiting to find out how much. He had not always been a man who weighed his sentences. Della had been told this by Mrs. Okafor, who had run the Long house for 11 years and considered exaggeration a moral failing. There had been a Theo before, louder, the housekeeper said, given to terrible singing in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, but that Theo belonged to the years when Marie was in the rooms, and those rooms had been quiet now for a little over 2. Della had never met Marielle. She had come after. She had answered an advertisement so discreet it didn't name the family, sat in a glass office across from a man who would not quite look at her, and watched a 4-year-old decide in under a minute that this stranger could be trusted with the important secret that the grey cat under the stairs was named Mr. Buttons, and was, in fact, a king. "You're the 7th, Theo had told her at that first meeting, in that flat, careful voice. "The others were qualified." "And I'm not?" "They were qualified," he'd said again, as if the word itself were the problem. Posey cried when each of them left. She didn't cry when they arrived. He'd turned his coffee cup a half-turn on the desk, not drinking it. "She laughed when you came in." "I don't know what that's worth. I'd like to find out." She'd taken the job for the money, she told herself. That was the useful answer, and Della liked answers that were useful. The real answer was the way the little girl had reached up without being asked and put one warm hand flat against Della's cheek, the way you'd check if something was real. Now Posey rode the pony 4 times because her father could not figure out how to say no to her, and Della watched the 2 of them and pressed down, hard, on the thing trying to lift in her chest. She knew exactly what that lifting was. It was the start of belonging somewhere, and belonging somewhere was how you got your heart handed back to you in a paper boat. She had learned that young, in a series of houses where she had been useful right up until the moment she wasn't, and she did not intend to learn it again at 29 in the most beautiful house she had ever stood inside. "You went somewhere," Theo said. He had come to stand beside her at the rail, near but not touching, the careful 6 inches he always kept. "I'm right here." You do that. You leave through your eyes, and your body stays to be polite. He watched his daughter come around again, ponytail flying. Where do you go? Nowhere interesting. She handed him a strawberry, mostly to give his hands something honest to do. Eat your fruit, Mr. Lang. You're getting philosophical, and the sun's not even down. He ate the strawberry. He did not stop looking at her while he did it, and Della discovered that there was no joke in the world long enough to bridge the particular distance of being looked at like that. The drive home took the lake road, windows down, because Posey declared the air conditioning too loud for thinking. The car smelled of warm leather and sunscreen, and the green of cut grass on the estates that slid past, hedges trimmed into walls, gates with no houses visible behind them. Posey fell asleep against her booster strap, with a half-eaten cloud of cotton candy gluing itself slowly to her wrist. She'll have that in her hair by morning, Della murmured. You always know what's about to go wrong, Theo said, eyes on the road. It's a useful talent. There it was, useful, the word landing on the exact bruise it always found. He didn't know. He couldn't. She smoothed it over the way she smoothed everything. Occupational hazard. You spend enough years cleaning up other people's spills, you start to see them coming. Other people's, he repeated. He drove the way he spoke, deliberately, both hands on the wheel. You never talk about your own. That's because mine are boring, and yours pay better. She watched a heron lift off the shallows, slow and prehistoric over the bright water. Why'd you say it? Back there. She felt him decide whether to pretend he didn't know what she meant. The lake road unspooled. A horn answered a horn answered a horn somewhere behind them, faint, because it was true. He said finally, and I'm tired of saying things that aren't, just because they're easier to hear. That's a dangerous habit for a man with shareholders. You're not a shareholder. No, Della said. I'm the help. She said it lightly, on purpose, a flag planted on ground she needed him to see. And the help and the principal don't. That's not a thing that happens, Theo. Not in the real version. In the real version, it's a very expensive lawsuit, and a little girl who loses a second person in 2 years. And I am not going to be the reason she learns that twice. He was quiet for so long she thought she'd won, which was the trouble with winning things you didn't want. You called me Theo, he said. You almost never do. She had. She turned her face to the window and the warm wind and didn't answer, and the heron flew on ahead of them down the bright edge of the water, as if it knew the way. The Lang house sat above the lake behind a long pale wall, all glass and limestone, designed by someone famous to look like it had grown there. In 9 months, Della had never stopped feeling like a guest who had wandered past the rope. The entry hall went up 2 stories to a window that held the whole evening sky, and her sandals on the cool stone floor made a sound that the room swallowed instantly, the way it swallowed all small sounds, all small people. She carried Posey up, cotton candy and all, the child's breath warm and sugary against her neck, the weight of her trusting and total. That weight was the most dangerous thing in the house, more dangerous than the man behind her with his honest sentences. You could lie to yourself about a man. You could not lie about the weight of a sleeping child who had decided you were home. There she is, said Mrs. Okafor, materializing in the upstairs hall with an armful of folded linen and an expression that had witnessed 11 years of this family and forgiven approximately none of it. Sand in the bed again, I suppose. Strawberries and cotton candy, Della said. We went rogue. Mrs. Okafor looked at the sleeping child, then at Theo coming up the stairs behind, then, longest of all, at Della. He smiled today, she said. I can always tell. He comes home with his shoulders an inch lower. She shifted the linens. You should know what that's worth, in this house. I haven't seen those shoulders since before. She did not say before what. In this house you never had to. She went down the hall and left the sentence behind her like a coat someone forgot. Della put Posey to bed in the room, painted the color of the inside of a shell, peeled the cotton candy off her wrist with a warm cloth, and sat a moment longer than the job required, listening to the small machine of the child's breathing, the lake's fast slap against the dock, a moth working the window screen. Useful, she told herself. You are useful here, and that is all, and that is plenty, and that is safe. The trouble was that the room smelled of crayons and lavender and somebody's whole entire heart, and none of those things had ever once been safe. She found Theo on the terrace, because that was where he went, every night, the way other men went to a glass of something. He didn't drink, that summer, hadn't, Mrs. Okafor said, since the accident, as if the one thing had to be paid for with the other. He just stood at the stone rail above the lake, with the dark water moving below, and the warm wind coming up off it, carrying the smell of weed and water, and far-off charcoal from somebody's late grill. She's down, Della said. Out cold. She'll be up at 6 demanding to know if ponies dream. They do, apparently, she told me on the way. Della leaned on the rail, the stone still holding the day's heat under her palms, careful to leave the 6 inches. The lake was a long sheet of moving black with one lit dock far off, and the lights of the houses laid down on the water like dropped coins. You don't come out here for the view, she said. You can't even see it in the dark. No, so why? He turned his wrist over on the rail, pressed his thumb to the soft inside of it, where a watch would sit, a small private motion she'd catalogued months ago without understanding. She liked the water, he said. Marielle, she'd have had Posey in it every day. I haven't taken her in once. 2 summers. He said the name like a man setting down something he'd carried too far. You're the first person I've told that to. Theo, I know what you said in the car. The lawsuit. The little girl. You're right about all of it. He kept his eyes on the dark. That's the part I can't do anything with. Being right has never once made a thing easier to want. The wind moved. Somewhere down the shore, a screen door clapped. A dog answered. The night went on being a summer night, for everyone who wasn't standing on this terrace. Della felt the whole architecture of her safety, the usefulness, the 6 inches, the flag she kept planting, and felt how thin it was. How it was made of paper and warming in the sun like the boat of strawberries had warmed all afternoon until the bottom went soft. I should check on her, she said, which was a lie, and they both knew it was a lie, and he let her have it, which was somehow worse. She did not check on her. She stood in the dark hall a long time with her back against the cool wall and her hand pressed flat to her own chest like a child checking if something was real. The disruption came the next morning, before the coffee. Before Posey had finished negotiating the precise number of pancakes that constituted breakfast. 3, then 4, then a sudden tactical retreat to as many as Della has. A car came up the long drive that no one had buzzed through the gate, which meant it belonged to someone who had a code, which meant family, and there was only one of those left who used it. Della heard the engine, and then the front doors, and then the heels on that swallowing stone floor, sharp enough that even the great hall couldn't eat the sound, which told you everything about the woman wearing them. Auntie Camille, Posey said, and slid off her stool, her whole small body going careful in a way that made something tighten in Della's stomach. Camille Brandt came into the kitchen in cream linen and dark glasses she did not take off indoors, smelling of a perfume that cost more than Della's monthly wage and a cigarette she'd put out in the drive. She was Marielle's sister. You could see the resemblance the way you could see a house in its blueprint. All the lines present and none of the warmth. She kissed the air beside Posey's head and looked at the pancakes as if they were evidence. Carbohydrates for breakfast, she said. How wholesome. Then, to Della, without looking at her, you can leave us. She's mid-pancake, Della said pleasantly. We have rules about abandoning men under fire. Behind the dark glasses, something shifted. Camille turned, finally, and took Della in, the apron, the flower on her wrist, the easy way the child had drifted half behind her, and Della watched her arrive at a conclusion she had clearly arrived at before, on the drive over, with help. Frankly, Camille said, and slid her phone onto the marble island so it spun a half-turn and stopped. Face up, I think you already know why I'm here. On the screen was the carousel. The lake behind it, bright and overexposed, and in the front of the frame, unmistakable, a tall man and a laughing woman with a little girl swinging between their joined hands, and below it, in the small grey letters of an account that fed on exactly this, a caption Della would not be able to unread for the rest of the summer. Lakeside Lang, billionaire widower's new nanny, looks awfully comfortable. Out of mourning at last? My nephew's lawyers can make that go away by lunch, Camille said, lifting Posey's plate out from under her and setting it on the counter out of reach, a small queen rearranging her board. What they can't make go away is whatever it is, she gestured, 2 manicured fingers, taking in Della, the apron, the whole warm-wrecked morning, this is. So you and I are going to have a conversation, Miss Hart, about exactly what you think is going to happen here. She smiled. It did not reach anywhere. And then I'm going to tell you what's actually going to happen instead. Theo came in from the hall with his sleeves rolled, drawn by the heels or the silence, and stopped when he saw the phone. Della watched him read it. She watched the careful man she knew go very still, the way the great hall went still, swallowing everything. And then, into that swallowing quiet, Posey said the worst possible true thing, in the bright, unguarded voice of a child who had been listening to every word and understood only the shape of them. Is Della going away too? No one answered her. And in the space where the answer should have been, Theo looked up from the phone, not at his sister-in-law, not at the lawyers she'd invoked, but straight across the kitchen at Della, with an expression she had never once seen him wear, and she understood with a cold drop in her stomach that whatever he was about to say, there would be no taking it back. No, Theo said, not to Della, to Posey. He crossed the kitchen and crouched until his eyes were level with his daughter's, the way Della had taught him to, months ago, without ever saying she was teaching him anything. Della isn't going anywhere. Eat your pancakes. Auntie Camille moved them. Then, we'll move them back. He reached past the counter, set the plate in front of her, and Della saw his hand was not quite steady, which was a thing she had never seen either. All of them, even the burned one. I like the burned one, Posey said, with the dignity of the deeply misunderstood, and the morning tried, for one breath, to go back to being a morning. Camille let it. That was the thing Della would understand later, that Camille was a woman who let small things happen, so that the large things she wanted would feel, by contrast, reasonable. She lifted her dark glasses at last and set them in her pale hair, and her eyes were Marielle's eyes, Della supposed, except that no one had ever looked at Della out of them with anything she'd want to keep. Theo, Camille said, warm as poured cream. Walk me out. We'll let your daughter finish her. What did we decide it was? Breakfast. You came up the drive without buzzing the gate, Theo said, standing. You can find your way back down it. I have the code because your wife gave it to me. The room took the word in and held it, the way it held all sound. Even Posey went still over her plate. I have a great many things because your wife gave them to me. That's rather the point of family, isn't it? We hold what's left. She looked at Della when she said it, and the look had a price tag on it, and the price was the whole warm-wrecked morning. 5 minutes. The terrace. Or I make my calls from the car instead, and you can read about your nanny in something with a wider circulation than that. Theo looked at Della. The question was in it, plain, the way everything about him was plain now. Do I go? Go, Della said. I've got the pancake situation contained. She made her voice the morning light voice, the sunscreen voice, the one that kept things up. Posey and I are going to count how many blueberries are legally allowed in one mouth. It's a serious study. 11, Posey said instantly. That's the hypothesis, Della agreed. Go, Mr. Lang. He went. Camille's heels followed, sharp across the stone, and the glass door to the terrace breathed shut behind them. And Della stood in the sudden quiet with a 4-year-old and a phone still lying face up on the marble like something that had washed ashore. She turned it over so the screen went dark. Why did Auntie Camille bring her picture phone? Posey asked, with 11 blueberries crowding her cheeks. Grown-ups do that, Della said. They bring pictures to fights the way you bring Mr. Buttons to the dentist. Makes them braver. She wet a cloth at the sink, the water running cold over her wrist, and the ordinary chill of it steadied her more than anything had since the engine in the drive. Don't talk with your mouth full. Troublemaker. 11 was ambitious. Through the glass she could see them, the man and the woman. The lake bright and enormous behind, the morning haze already burning off the water into the kind of hot white sky that promised a scorcher by noon. She could not hear a word. Camille's hands moved. Theo's didn't. He stood with his thumb pressed to the inside of his wrist where a watch would sit, and Della, who had catalogued that gesture for months without understanding it, understood it now, all at once. The way you understand a word in another language the moment someone is hurt in it. It was the gesture of a man holding very still, so that nothing would spill. She made herself look away. She made herself count blueberries. On the terrace, the heat came up off the stone, and Camille Brandt smiled at her sister's husband and said, "You look well." It's obscene, frankly, how well you look. 2 summers and you've gone and gotten colour in your face. Say what you came to say, Camille. I'm protecting that child. She said it the way other people said the truth. Someone has to think about what this looks like, because clearly, you've stopped. A nanny, Theo, 29, no people to speak of, came up out of nowhere with a clever mouth and good timing, and now there are photographs. She tapped the rail with 1 nail. Do you know what the board of a family foundation can do with photographs? The Marielle Brandt Lang Foundation has her name on the door. My sister's name. And her widower is on a carousel, making eyes at the staff. Don't. Don't what? Don't say staff? That's what she is. You pay her. There's a contract. I had Pearson read it twice. Camille's voice dropped, gentled, which was worse. I know what you're doing. You're lonely, and she's warm, and she's good with Posey, and it feels like the lights came back on. I understand it. I do. But you don't reward the help by ruining her, and you don't keep a woman in your house because your daughter's afraid of doors closing. You've confused 2 different kinds of love, and the lawyers will charge you for the confusion. For a long moment, Theo said nothing. The lake moved. A motorboat drew a slow white line across the far water, and the sound of it arrived a beat late, the way thunder does. You never liked Marielle either, he said. Not really. You liked being her sister. There's a difference, and you charged her for the confusion her whole life. It landed. Della, watching through glass, saw it land, saw the cream go out of the woman's face for half a second before the dark glasses came back down off her hair like a visor. I'm having lunch with Gerald Pearson on Thursday, Camille said. Light again, lethal again. And with 2 trustees who already think you've lost the thread. By Friday there will be a conversation about Posey's stability, and about whether a man who can't keep his house out of the gossip columns is exercising sound judgment about a great deal more than his social life. She let it sit. I'd hate for it to come to anyone reviewing arrangements. Custody is such an ugly word over lunch. The glass door breathed open. Della had not decided to open it. She found she had crossed the kitchen and opened it anyway, with the cold cloth still in her hand, and Posey's voice behind her announcing that 12 blueberries was a new world record, and she required a witness. He doesn't make threats, Della heard herself say. I've worked for him 9 months. He's never once made one. So I'll just stand here and admire how easily it comes to you. Camille turned. Up close, in the hot white light, the resemblance to a woman Della had never met was almost unbearable. All the lines present, and the warmth filed off. And there she is, Camille said. The clever mouth. I wondered when it would arrive. She looked Della over once, head to apron. Tell me, Miss Hart. The last family. The Asquiths. Was it? Yes, I had someone make a call. You left rather suddenly. No reference. Care to tell him why? Or shall I, over lunch on Thursday, to people who decide things? The terrace tilted, very slightly, the way a floor does when you have been standing on it pretending it is solid. Della felt the old cold come up through the soles of her feet, the cold of a series of houses, of being useful right up until the morning she wasn't. That's between me and the Asquiths, she said. Her voice held. She was proud of it for holding. It always is. With girls like you. Camille slid her phone off the marble and into her bag. 5 days, Theo. Get your house in order, or I'll bring people who will order it for you. She kissed the air by Posey's head. Goodbye, darling. Eat your vegetables. And her heels went sharp across the swallowing stone, and the great front doors opened and shut, and the engine started in the drive. And then it was just the 3 of them, and a plate of pancakes going cold, and a phrase Della would not be able to unhear. No reference. Care to tell him why? What did she mean? Theo said quietly. About the Asquiths. Eat your pancakes, Mr. Lang. You've gone philosophical, and it isn't even 9. Della, not in front of the world record holder, she said, and tipped her head at Posey, and watched him understand, and watched him let it go the way he let her have her small lies, which was, she was learning, its own kind of unbearable. The day went on being a summer day because days do. Posey needed to be in the lake, or at least near it, or at the absolute minimum permitted to narrate the lake from the safety of the dock. And so by 10, they were down on the warm grey boards, with the water slapping the pilings and the smell of it everywhere, green and mineral, and a little of gasoline from the boats, and Posey lying on her stomach trailing one hand and reporting on fish that may or may not have been leaves. Theo came down in his shirt sleeves and sat on the dock like a man unused to sitting on things, and for a while neither of them said anything, and the not saying was full. I want to tell you what happened, he said at last, watching his daughter and not Della. Not Camille's version. Mine, so you know what you're standing in front of, since you keep insisting on standing in front of it. Theo, Marielle drove the lake road at night because she liked it. She liked the windows down. He turned his wrist over, pressed his thumb to the soft inside of it. Posey was 2.5. She wasn't in the car. People always ask that, eventually, with their faces, and I'd rather tell you before your face asks. She wasn't in the car. It was just Marie and the road she loved and a truck that came over the line, and it was nobody's fault, which is the part no one can stand. There's no one to be angry at. I've looked. I've looked for 2 years for somebody to hand it to. The water moved under the dock. So when you say I'm right about the lawsuit and the little girl and it being a terrible idea, I know you're right. I'm just very tired of being a man whose whole life is the correct decision. Della looked at the back of Posey's sun-warm head, the ponytail coming undone, one small hand making the lake into a story. My mother left me with people, she said. The words came up from a long way down, in the green smell off the water. When I was small, cousins mostly, and a couple of times people who weren't even that. And I learned, I was a fast learner, it's my best quality. I learned that if you were useful, you got to stay. You did the dishes nobody asked you to do. You watched the littler kids. You saw the spills coming. Her voice was very level. She kept it level on purpose. And it works, that's the thing. It buys you months, sometimes years. And then one day they don't need a useful girl anymore, or they need the room, or they just look at you across the kitchen and you can see you've stopped counting toward anything. And you pack the same bag you always pack. She watched the heron from yesterday, or its cousin, stand one-legged in the shallows down the shore. The Asquiths needed a useful girl. And then Mr. Asquith decided what use he wanted me for. And I said no. And Mrs. Asquith decided it was easier to believe I'd asked for it. So there's your no reference. That's the why. Theo had gone very still beside her. Not the careful stillness, a different one. Tell me his first name, he said. And there was something underneath the flat voice now. Something with an edge. And Della almost laughed because it was the first uncareful thing she'd ever heard him want. No, she said, because you'd do something, and it would end up in the same gossip account, and Camille would have her Friday after all. She bumped his shoulder with hers. The first time in 9 months she had crossed the 6 inches on purpose, and felt him go absolutely motionless at the contact. I told you so you'd know what you're standing in front of. Not so you'd buy a sword. Della. He said her name like it was the whole sentence. When you say usefulness buys you months, is that what you think this is? The pancakes and the blueberry studies and the... Is that you buying months? The lake slapped the pilings. A child somewhere shrieked with the particular joy of cold water. Posey, on her stomach, announced that the lake had 11 fish, then 12, then, "As many fish as Della has." And neither adult on the dock could speak for a moment. "I think," Della said carefully, "that I should check on her." "She's 2 feet away." "I know." Della stood, because standing was a thing her body knew how to do when the rest of her didn't. "That's how close I let myself get. 2 feet. It's a good distance. You can pull a child back from the edge of a dock from 2 feet. She looked down at him, at the man sitting unaccustomed on the warm boards, with his sleeves rolled, and his whole quiet face open in a way she could not afford. "I'm not buying months, Theo. That's the trouble. Somewhere in the last 9 months, I forgot to keep the receipt." She walked back up to the house before he could answer, and her sandals on the cool stone of the great hall made the small, swallowed sound they always made. And for once, she was glad the room ate it. Because what she had just said was not a thing she wanted hanging in any air she had to keep breathing. Mrs. Okafor was in the laundry, which, on a hot afternoon, was the warmest room in the house, and smelled of hot cotton and the particular clean steam of an iron working. And she did not look up when Della came in and sat on the folding stool by the window, as if her legs had decided the matter. "She found out about the Asquiths," Della said. The iron hissed. "I imagine she had someone find out. That one doesn't dig, she pays for the hole." Mrs. Okafor turned a shirt, pressed the yoke flat. "You'll be wondering how she knew where to look. The previous girls, the qualified ones. 2 of them are still in the agency that placed you. Camille keeps in touch with people who keep in touch with people. She has done since before you came. She likes to know the staff better than the staff know themselves." She set the iron upright. "She is not, whatever else, a stupid woman. It would be much easier if she were. She's going to have me out by Friday. Possibly." Mrs. Okafor finally looked at her, 11 years of this family in the look, and Della braced for the verdict the woman dispensed the way other people dispensed weather reports. "Let me tell you a thing, since no one in this house tells anyone anything until it's lying face up on the marble. When Mrs. Lang was alive, Camille came to this house perhaps twice a year, and stayed an hour, and counted the silver with her eyes on the way out. She loved her sister the way you love a mirror, fond of it, particular about its frame." The iron hissed again. After, when this house went quiet. Suddenly she had a code and opinions and a great interest in Posey's stability. You want to know what she's protecting, you might ask what was in Mrs. Lang's name that's now in a foundation with a board. And who sits on that board? And who'd sit on a great deal more of it if a grieving widower were declared to be making poor decisions. She folded the shirt with 2 sharp motions. "I'm only a housekeeper. I fold things. But I've folded the laundry of 3 lawyers' visits this spring, and not one of them was about that child's feelings." Della sat with it, the hot cotton smell thick around her, the iron ticking as it cooled. "You're telling me it's about money. I'm telling you it's about money wearing a photograph of a little girl's face," Mrs. Okafor said. "Which is the most dangerous kind, because you can't fight it without looking like you're the one who doesn't care about the child." She set the folded shirt on the pile, squared the corner. He smiled today. "Before all this, I told you, I can always tell. Whatever you decide to do, Miss Hart, decide it knowing the house has been cold for 2 years, and you're the first warm thing to walk through it, and there are people who have done the arithmetic on what a warm thing costs." She picked up the next shirt. "Now go and rescue him. He's been sitting on that dock long enough to sunburn the back of a neck. I'll be the one putting aloe on." Della went. But she did not go to the dock. She went, instead, to the small study off the hall that Theo used for the things he could not do at the office, because something Mrs. Okafor had said had hooked into something Camille had said, and the hook would not let go. A foundation with her sister's name on the door. A board. A Thursday lunch with 2 trustees and a man named Pearson. She told herself she only wanted to understand the shape of the thing coming for her. That was a useful answer, and Della liked useful answers. The study was cool and dim, the blinds half drawn against the white afternoon, and it smelled of paper, and the cedar of the shelves, and faintly, of the lake coming through a window cracked an inch. On the desk, among the ordinary debris of a man's work, was a folder, and on the folder, in the kind of embossed type that costs money to look modest, was the name of the Marielle Brandt Lang Foundation, and under it, paperclipped, a letter on the heavy stock of a firm called Pearson Vance, and Della, who had spent her whole life learning to read a room before it could read her, read the first paragraph before she could decide not to. She read it twice. The iron cold came up through her feet again, but for a different reason this time, a reason that had nothing to do with the Asquiths or her own packed bag. The letter was a draft. It was dated 3 days out, and it proposed, in the bloodless courtesy of people who decide things, that in light of recent developments and ongoing concerns regarding the principal's judgment, the Foundation's trustees formally request a review, and the words after that swam. Because the words after that were guardianship provisions pertaining to the minor child, and a name in the signature block that was not Camille's, and not Theo's, a name Della did not know, a man's name, with the title co-trustee under it, and a date of appointment that was 8 months old. 8 months. 1 month after Della had come. Someone had been put on that board the month after the laughing Nanny walked in. And it was not Camille who had signed to put him there. She heard the dock door, far off, and Posey's voice coming up the lawn bright as a struck bell, and Theo's lower under it, and she understood she had perhaps a minute. She put the folder back exactly as it had been, the letter squared, the clip at the same angle, the small, careful art of leaving a room the way you found it, which she had learned in houses where being caught meant the bag, but she could not put back what she had read. She stood in the cedar and paper dark, with her heart doing the thing it had been trying to do since the boardwalk, the lifting thing, except now it was lifting into something with a floor missing under it. Because there were 2 stories in this house now. There was the one she'd been telling herself, the useful girl, the 6 inches, the lawsuit, the simple, clean danger of a billionaire's honest mouth. And there was this other one, 8 months old, with a stranger's name in a signature block, and a date that lined up with her own arrival like 2 halves of something cut, and she did not know yet which story she was standing in, only that the cold coming up through her feet was the cold of a much deeper water than the one Posey had spent the morning counting fish in. The door opened. Posey came in first, wet-haired and triumphant, holding something cupped in both small hands. Della. Della, I caught a fish, except it's a leaf, but it's my leaf, and Daddy says I can keep it if you say. So you have to say. You can keep it, Della said, and her voice came out steady. The morning light voice, the one that kept things up even when the floor was gone. Leaves that brave deserve a home. Theo came in behind, sun on his face, the back of his neck pink the way Mrs. Okafor had promised, and he stopped just inside the study door, and Della watched him take in where she was standing. In his private room, by his desk, beside the folder she had so carefully put back. And she watched the careful man go careful in a new way. A way she had not seen, a way that was. She realized with the floor still missing, not suspicion at all. It was fear. Della, he said, quiet under the child's chatter. How long have you been in here? And there it was, the moment cut clean in 2. The leaf in Posey's hands, and the letter on the desk 3 days from a board that wanted to decide who a little girl belonged to, and Della understood that whatever either of them said next, in this cedar-dark room, with the lake coming through the cracked window, there would be no putting it back the way they'd found it. Long enough, Della said. There was no clean way out of the small cedar room, and she had stopped looking for one. Long enough to read the first paragraph and put it back square. It's an old habit. I'm very good at leaving rooms exactly the way I found them. Between them, Posey lifted the leaf in its cup of 2 small hands, holding it out like a candle she was afraid of putting out. Della, the leaf needs a house now, Daddy said. You said brave leaves get a home. They do. Della crouched, grateful for the excuse to put her eyes anywhere but on Theo's face. Here's the job, and it's a big one. Go find Mrs. Okafor and ask her for the little glass jar shaped like a beehive, the one on the high shelf. She'll have to reach for it. which is the whole point. She likes to be needed. Fill it from the cold tap, not the warm one. Leaves prefer cold. Can you carry water across a whole hall without wearing it? I'm 4 3/4, Posey said, with the dignity of the gravely insulted, and went, wet ponytail swinging, the leaf held out before her down the cool stone of the hall. Della listened to the small feet cross to the laundry, heard Mrs. Okafor's low voice take the catastrophe with the seriousness it deserved, a beehive jar. Is it? Well, we don't keep brave leaves in just anything, do we? And then there were only the two of them, and the half-drawn blinds, and the white afternoon pushing at the glass, and the folder on the desk that neither of them would look at. The room smelled of cedar and old paper, and through the inch of open window, the green of the lake. Theo did not ask again how long she'd been there. He crossed to the desk and picked the folder up the way you pick up something you don't trust your own hands around. You don't have to, Della said. I can tell you what's in it. I'd rather you heard it from me than from her, over a lunch, 3 days from now. I filed it, he said. I filed it and decided not to look at it. That's worse than not knowing. He opened it anyway. She watched him read the page she had read. She watched his eyes go down it twice, the way hers had, and she knew the exact line where the floor went out from under him, because his thumb found the soft inside of his wrist and pressed, hard, the gesture of a man holding very still so that nothing would spill. Guardianship provisions pertaining to the minor child, he read aloud, very quietly, as though saying the words slowly might rearrange them into something survivable. In light of recent developments and ongoing concerns regarding the principal's judgment, the trustees formally request a review. He turned the page. The paperclip held its angle. There's a name in the signature block. I saw it. I didn't know it. Stephen Brandt. He set the folder down with terrible care. Camille's cousin. He breeds horses in 2 countries and has never in his life held an opinion that cost him $1. A breath went out of him. He is a co-trustee of my wife's foundation, and I have no memory of agreeing to it. The motorboat on the far water carved its line, and the sound of it arrived a beat late, the way it always did off the lake. When? Della said. The keeping things up voice held, even now. When did you not agree to it? He looked at the date under the name, and she watched him do the arithmetic she had already done in the dark of this room 10 minutes before. It landed heavier on him, because it was his life it was rearranging. 8 months ago. He said it like a stone going down through black water. There was a stack. Camille brought it last autumn. She said the foundation would lose its standing if it didn't have signatures, that I didn't need to read a word, that she'd had Pearson go through every line so I wouldn't have to think about any of it. His thumb pressed white against his wrist. I wasn't reading things that year. I was signing where the little flags were. She put a flag on this page, and I signed under it, and thanked her for handling it. A month after I came, Della said. He went still in the new way, the uncareful way she'd seen for the first time on the dock. A month after you came. The 2 stories she had been holding apart all afternoon folded together with an almost physical sound, like a book closing. There was the one she'd been telling herself, the useful girl, the 6 inches, the simple clean danger of a man with an honest mouth. And there was this one, 8 months old, with a stranger's name and a date that lined up with her own arrival like 2 halves of something cut clean. She didn't wait for the photograph, Della said slowly. She's been building this since the month your daughter put her hand on my face and decided I was home. The carousel just gave her a date to put on the letter. She told me on the terrace I'd confused 2 kinds of love. Theo's voice had gone flat and cold, and somewhere far underneath it, dangerous. She had it backwards. She didn't get afraid when she saw a man on a carousel. She got afraid the day this house stopped being cold. That's the thing she's been protecting against. Not a scandal. Warmth. Warmth changes a man's will. His will, Della repeated, and the word sat between them with a new weight. His judgment. His estate. The board of a foundation with 40 million in it that votes the way the family votes. He pressed his wrist. Marielle left most of it to the foundation. I was glad to. It has her name on the door. I never once asked who'd be standing inside it if I ever, He stopped. If I were ever declared a man who'd lost the thread. Della heard the laundry door again, far down the hall, heard Posey reporting the successful relocation of the leaf, heard Mrs. Okafor murmur something that made the child laugh. The ordinary sounds of the warm house went on existing, 2 rooms away, as though the floor had not just dropped out of this one. I need air that isn't this, Della said. I can't think in here. She walked out, and he followed, the way he'd been following her all summer at his careful 6 inches, except that the 6 inches felt different now. Felt like a thing that was about to be measured by people who decided things. The kitchen still held the wreck of the morning. Posey's pancakes sat where they'd gone cold, the syrup tacked to amber, a fly working the rim of the plate. The big refrigerator hummed and then dropped a fistful of ice into its own tray, with a clatter that made them both flinch. Beyond the windows the lake threw hard white light, and the cicadas had started up in the heat, that long-rising summer note that meant noon was coming in like a furnace. I'm going to fight it, Theo said. He said it the way he said everything, plainly, but there was a current in it now. I'm going to call Hollis, my own lawyer, mine, not the firm Camille keeps on a string, and I'm going to make him understand that a man is allowed to come back to life and still be fit to raise his own child. I'm going to put Stephen Brandt's appointment in front of a judge and ask how a horse breeder ended up between me and my daughter. Good, Della said. And for one breath it was good. It was the 2 of them on the same side of a table, and she felt the dangerous lifting thing in her chest tilt toward hope. Tear it down. All of it. Make her explain the date to a room that doesn't owe her lunch. You stay. He turned to her, and his face was open in the way she could not afford, and his certainty was a beautiful thing to watch right up until she heard the rest of the sentence. You stay, and I stand you in front of every trustee on that board. Posey laughs when you come into a room. She didn't laugh for 2 years and then you walked in and she laughed. Let them put that in their minutes. Let them look at what you are and call it bad judgment to their faces. The hope went out of Della so fast it left a cold space behind it. You'll stand me, she said. Quietly, in front of the board. As the truth. As what's best for her. The truth has my name in it, Theo. She set her hand flat on the cool marble of the island to steady whatever was tilting. You'd put me in a room with people who decide things and ask them to look at me and see what's best. They won't see what's best. They'll see a 29-year-old with no people and no reference and a clever mouth, exactly the way Camille described me to you on the terrace, and the worst part is they'll be looking at the truth too. It does look like what it looks like. That's the whole trap. It's true, and it looks terrible at the same time. And you can't fight that by holding me up to the light. You hold me up to the light, and they read the Asquiths into the minutes, and a little girl's name gets dragged through a room next to mine. I'd be protecting you. You didn't ask me. It came out before she could play it smooth. You decided. You stood there and made a plan with me in it, and you didn't ask me whether I'd be spent. He looked genuinely confused, and that was almost the worst of it, that he didn't know he'd done anything. Spent. That's the word. That's exactly the word. Her voice stayed level by force, the way you hold a tray level walking through a crowd. The Asquiths kept me too. They kept me right up until keeping me meant something they wanted, and then I was a thing that had a use, and the use changed, and I packed my bag. You don't get to spend me to win, Theo. Even to win the right thing. Especially the right thing. Because then you'll feel justified about it forever, and you'll never once notice you did it. The refrigerator dropped another fistful of ice. Outside, a screen door clapped somewhere down the shore, and a dog answered it, and the cicadas rose and fell. I would never. He started. I know you believe that. She picked up Posey's cold plate, because her hands needed an honest thing to do, and scraped the tacky pancakes into the bin, and ran the tap until the water went cold over her wrist, and the ordinary chill of it steadied her the way it had that morning. That's not the same as it being true. The Asquiths believed they were good people too. Right up to the morning they needed to believe something easier. She heard him not move. She heard the 6 inches become a thing you could fall into. Then tell me what to do, he said, and there was no strategy left in it, only a man at the rail of a terrace in the dark. Because I'm not going to stand in this house and let 3 people with a date on a letter decide my daughter is better off with less of the only thing that's made her laugh in 2 years. I'm not built to do nothing, Della. I tried being a man whose whole life was the correct decision. It's how I ended up signing my child away under a little paper flag. She didn't have an answer that was both true and kind, so she gave him neither, which was its own small unbearable thing, and she dried her hands and went to find the child before the child came to find them. She found Mrs. Okafor instead, in the cool of the back pantry, slotting jars onto a shelf, and the beehive jar already gone, carried off in triumph, Posey installed at the sunroom window to watch her leaf acclimatize to indoor life. The pantry smelled of dry goods and the faint vinegar bite of the cleaning the woman did when she was thinking. "You've the face," Mrs. Okafor said, without turning. "The one girls get in this house when they've stood too close to the machinery and felt the teeth go round." "There's a co-trustee," Della said. "Stephen Brandt, appointed 8 months ago, a month after I started." Mrs. Okafor's hands paused on a jar, then went on. So she's let you see it. That's new. She doesn't usually show her hand to the staff. She set the jar straight. It means she's stopped thinking of you as staff. That's not a promotion, child. That's a target moving from your back to your front. You said this spring you folded the laundry of 3 lawyers' visits. Della kept her voice down. The sunroom was 1 wall away. "Tell me what you didn't tell me." "You were saving it. You always save the worst for when a person can finally carry it." The housekeeper turned then, 11 years of the family in her face, and for once there was no verdict in it, only a kind of tiredness. When Mrs. Lang was with us, she said there was money, and it was hers, and she did as she liked with it, which mostly meant giving it away faster than the men in suits could keep up with. The foundation was meant to do that forever. Her name, her wishes, her board to carry them out. But a board can be a garden or a fortress, depending on who plants it. And after, she did not finish the word. No one in this house ever had to. After, Mr. Lang couldn't tell a garden from a fortress. He couldn't tell Tuesday from Thursday. And Camille could tell the difference between every single thing, every hour of every day, the way she always has. She planted a fortress and told him it was a garden, and put his pen in his hand. "And if he's declared unfit," Della said, the cold coming up through the soles of her feet, "the fortress holds the child too. The fortress holds everything." Mrs. Okafor picked up her cloth. "The estate, the foundation, the decisions about a little girl's school and her summers, and who's allowed to make her laugh. You asked me yesterday if it was about money. I told you it was money wearing a photograph of a child's face. I'll tell you the rest now that you can carry it. The only thing standing between Camille and the whole of it is whether Theo Lang looks, to a room of trustees, like a sound man." She wrung the cloth. "And the single most damaging thing a sound man could possibly be caught doing this summer, the thing that makes the whole review look reasonable instead of cruel, is keeping a young, unsuitable, no-reference nanny in his house because his daughter cries at closing doors. She let it sit. You're not the obstacle to her plan, Miss Hart. You're the engine of it. As long as you're under this roof, you're the proof she needs." Della stood very still in the vinegar and dry goods cool, and understood, all at once, the shape of the thing that had been coming for her since the carousel. "If I'm here, I'm the reason he loses Posey." "If you're here, Mrs. Okafor said, not unkindly, which made it worse. "You are the photograph she shows the board. The warm thing in the cold house. The exact thing she did the arithmetic on 8 months ago." She turned back to her shelf. "I'm only a housekeeper. I fold things, and I keep things, and I've watched this family hand its happiness to the wrong people for 11 years. I'm not telling you to go. God help me, I'd chain you to the radiator if I thought it would take." Her voice roughened a half degree, and steadied. "I'm telling you that whatever you decide, you're deciding it with the teeth in view now. Don't let anyone in this house tell you you didn't know what they were." She did not answer. There was no answer that was both true and bearable, and she was running out of those today. She went to the sunroom. Posey had the beehive jar set in a square of hard noon light on the sill, the leaf inside drifting in its cold water, and she was explaining to it, gravely, the rules of the house. No biting Mr. Buttons. Naps were non-negotiable. The burned pancake was the best pancake, and anyone who said otherwise was wrong. The room was hot, with stored sun, and smelled of warm glass, and the geraniums Mrs. Okafor kept alive out of spite. Della sat on the floor beside the child, and let the small, steady voice run over her like the lake over Posey's trailing hand. "Is the leaf scared?" Posey asked. "In a new house?" "A little, probably," Della said. "New houses are scary. You don't know yet if you're allowed to stay." "You can stay," Posey told the leaf, with the absolute authority of the very young. And then she put one warm hand flat on Della's cheek, the way she had in the glass office 9 months ago, the way she did when she wanted to check that something was real. "You can stay too." Della held very still, so that nothing would spill. The child went down for her nap without the usual treaty negotiations, worn out by lake and leaf, and the strange electric weather of the adults. And Della sat by the shell-pink bed longer than the job required, listening to the small machine of the breathing, the cicadas outside, a far-off motorboat, the house being enormous and quiet around one sleeping girl. Useful, she told herself, out of old habit, and the word had no flaw under it anymore. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. She almost didn't look. She wished, for the rest of that summer, that she hadn't. The number was unknown, the message already long, and it opened the way the woman opened everything, with the word that was her whole signature. "Frankly, Miss Hart, the agency was very helpful," the message began, the way Camille had been very helpful to a grieving man with a stack of papers. And Della felt the perfume of that word come off the screen as clearly as if the dark glasses had walked back into the room. "I'll be brief because you strike me as a woman who prefers it. You read the letter, I expect. A clever girl always reads what's left lying about. I'm not a monster. I'm an aunt, which is sometimes the same job done louder. So let me tell you the true shape of Thursday." The next part came in a second buzz, and a third, the way she imagined Camille talked, in waves that didn't let you answer. "If you are in that house on Friday, there is a review, and the review is ugly, and your name goes in it, next to the Asquiths, and a little girl I genuinely love grows up hearing that the nice nanny was the reason her father was found wanting. That happens. I'll make it happen. I'm telling you plainly because I respect you enough not to pretend. But here is the other door. You leave, quietly. This week, no scene. A resignation he can show the trustees as proof of his own good judgment. And there is no review. None. Stephen withdraws the request. I cancel my lunch. The foundation goes back to being a sleepy little charity with a dead woman's name on the door. Theo keeps his daughter, undisturbed, unquestioned. He'll be hurt. He'll be hurt either way. That's not on the table. The only choice is whether his daughter pays for it too. And the last one landed like a hand closing. I'll make it worth your while. Not a bribe, call it a settlement, call it a head start, call it whatever lets you sleep. And the thing you've never had and can't buy, a reference. A real one, on real paper, from a name that opens doors instead of closing them. The Asquiths took that from you. I can give it back. Name your number, be gone by Friday, and you walk out of this with more than you walked in with, which is more than girls, like you usually get. Think about what's actually best for the child, Miss Hart. You're so very good at that. Della sat on the floor of the cool, dim nursery, with the phone glowing in her hand and the shell-pink walls holding the child's quiet breathing. And she read it twice, the way she read everything, and the iron cold came up through her feet, and for the first time all summer, it was not the cold of her own packed bag. It was the cold of the cruelest true thing she'd been handed yet, because Camille was not lying. That was the trap inside the trap. Every word of it was true. As long as Della stayed, she was the photograph. As long as she stayed, a little girl 2 feet away in a shell-pink room might grow up paying for the fact that she'd put a warm hand on the wrong cheek. Leaving would save Posey. Leaving was the useful thing, the correct decision. The thing a girl who'd learned young to see the spills coming would do without being asked, and she would never be able to tell Theo why, because the moment she told him, he would fight, and the moment he fought, the review would come, and they would be exactly where they were now, except with Posey's name in the minutes. The only version of saving them was the one where she walked out looking like precisely what Camille had described to the board. A no-reference girl who left suddenly. No scene. Taking a settlement, exactly as she'd left the Asquiths. She would have to become the lie to keep the child out of it. She would have to pack the same bag and let him believe, forever, that she was the kind of woman who packed it. Downstairs she could hear him on the phone. Hollis, his own lawyer. His real one. His low voice, making the plan he thought would protect her. The plan that would put her name in a room and a child's name beside it. He didn't know yet. He was, 2 floors down, fighting for the very thing that fighting would destroy. Della stood, because standing was a thing her body knew how to do when the rest of her had run out of floor. She looked at the leaf in its beehive jar on the windowsill, drifting in its cold water in its new and frightening house, told you could stay by a 4-year-old who believed she had the authority to grant it. She looked at the sleeping shape under the shell-pink blanket, the ponytail come undone, one small hand open on the pillow, as though it was still waiting to be put against a cheek. Then she went down the hall to the room over the garage, where her own bag lived, the bag she had carried out of a series of houses, the bag she'd promised herself she would not pack again at 29, in the most beautiful house she had ever stood inside. She set it on the bed. The zipper made the sound it always made, the small sound of a girl leaving the way she found things. Her thumb hovered over the glowing screen, over the blinking place where Camille was waiting for a number, and from 2 floors down Theo's voice rose for a moment, warm and certain and entirely wrong about what was about to happen to all of them. Saying her name to his lawyer like it was the whole of his argument, and Della, who had spent her whole life learning to leave a room before it could decide to make her leave, began, very steadily, to type. She typed a 5, and then a 0, and the second 0, and her thumb hovered over the place where the rest of a number would go, and the bag sat open on the bed, with its mouth, showing the worn lining she knew by heart, the lining of a girl who left the way she found things. The room over the garage was hot under the roof, the afternoon pressing on the single window, the smell of warm dust and the laundry soap of her own folded shirts. Down through the floor she could hear Theo's voice, low and certain, building the wrong plan around her name. She looked at the number. She looked at what was above it, the long pale message, wave after wave of it, the perfume of that one word coming off the glass. Frankly, I respect you enough not to pretend. I'll make it worth your while. Name your number. Be gone by Friday. And the clever part of her, the part that had read a room before it could read her since she was 9 years old, sat up very straight in the heat and went cold and quiet and awake. Camille had written it down. A woman who was not stupid, Mrs. Okafor had said it twice. It would be much easier if she were, had put it in text. The threat to smear a girl's name in a guardianship review. The offer to make that review vanish, in exchange for a quiet resignation. The dangled reference, the dangled settlement. The whole machine of it laid out in the grey letters of a phone, time-stamped. Sent. She had been so sure of the kind of girl Della was. A no-people girl, with a clever mouth and a packed bag. The kind who took the door that opened and was grateful. Della deleted the number. Her thumb did not shake. She pressed the buttons that saved the whole conversation as a picture. Once, twice, every wave of it, the way you photograph a room you might have to prove you stood in. And then she zipped the bag shut with the small familiar sound and put it back on the floor of the closet where it lived, in the dark, where it could keep on being a thing she owned and did not have to be. Not today, she said, to no one, to the leaf 2 rooms over, to the girl she had been in a series of kitchens. Not like this. She went down the stairs into the cool of the great hall, and her sandals made the swallowed sound, and for the first time all summer she did not hate the room for eating it. She let it eat it. She had a different kind of noise to make now. Theo was in the study with the phone to his ear, and the folder open in front of him, his sleeves still rolled, the back of his neck still sunburned the way Mrs. Okafor had promised, and he was saying, "Then we put her in front of the trustees. Hollis, we let them see what she is with the child. I'm telling you it ends the conversation. Hang up," Della said. He turned. Whatever was in her face stopped him. She watched him hear it. Hollis, I'll call you back. He set the phone down on the cedar desk, screen to the wood. You were typing. I heard you stop. I was about to take a number. She crossed to the desk and laid her own phone down beside his, face up, the grey waves of it glowing in the dim room. 500,000, I think she'd have gone to, before lunch. A reference on real paper. A head start. All I had to do was be gone by Friday. No scene, the way I left the Asquiths. She watched his eyes go down the screen, and his jaw change. Read it. All of it. She wrote it down, Theo. She was so sure of what I am that she put it in writing. He read. The room smelled of paper and cedar and the inch of lake coming through the cracked window, and outside the cicadas held their long furnace note. And she watched the careful man read the thing his sister-in-law had typed to the help, and she watched his thumb go to the soft inside of his wrist and press, hard, holding very still so that nothing would spill. She offered to make a guardianship review disappear, he said slowly, if you resigned. And to make it ugly, if I didn't. My name next to the Asquiths. A little girl growing up hearing the nanny was the reason. Della kept her voice level by force, the tray held flat through the crowd. Every word of it true, which is the trap. As long as I'm in this house, I'm the photograph she shows the board. She's right about that. That's the part that nearly worked. Nearly, he looked up. She made one mistake. Della put one finger on the glass, on the wave that said, I'll make it worth your while. She wrote it down. A woman terrified that you'll be declared unsound for poor judgment just put coercion in a text message to your daughter's nanny. She's been telling you for a year that she's the steady one, and you're the man who can't tell Tuesday from Thursday. The cold awake thing in her was steady now, almost calm. There's the steady one's handwriting. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, something went through his face that she had not seen on it before. Not the careful stillness, not the new, uncareful fear, but something older waking up, the loud man Mrs. Okafor said had sung terribly in the kitchen at 6 a.m. 2 years under the quiet. You came down to give me this, he said. You had the bag out. I heard the closet. You were going to take her door, and instead you came down and handed me a weapon. I didn't buy you a sword, Della said. I'm correcting the record. You don't get to spend me in front of a board. That stands. I won't be the exhibit. She held his eyes. But I'm also not going to vanish quietly to make it clean for everyone and let her tell you forever that I was the kind of girl who vanishes. I'm tired, Theo. I've been leaving rooms my whole life. I'd like to try staying in one and turning the lights on instead. The study door pushed open a hand's width, and Mrs. Okafor stood there with a stack of pressed shirts against her hip and the expression of a woman who had heard the last 3 sentences and intended to pretend she had heard none of them. I knocked, she said, having not knocked. Mr. Lang, you'll want me for this, I expect, since I'm the one who carried the coffee last autumn when the stack of papers came. And I'm the one who watched Mrs. Brandt put the little flags on the pages and tell you not to trouble yourself reading a word. She set the shirts down on the chair by the door, squared the corner of the pile out of long habit. I've 11 years of carrying things into this house and watching where they're set down. I can tell a judge where that one was set down, and who held the pen, and whose hand moved the flag. Theo looked at her as though the furniture had spoken. You'd say that. Under oath. About family. Family, Mrs. Okafor let the word sit. Dry as the laundry. I've worked for this family 11 years, and I've never once been asked to lie for it, until the spring it went quiet. I declined then. I'll decline now, in a louder room, if it'll keep that child where she laughs. She picked the shirts back up, the visit apparently concluded, on her own authority. She's protecting 40 million with a photograph of a little girl's face, and the only thing that's let her do it is that nobody in this house ever reads the page. Read the page, Mr. Lang. It's a novelty. You might enjoy it. And she was gone. Down the hall, the verdict dispensed, and the laundry undelivered, leaving the smell of hot cotton behind her, like a coat someone forgot. Theo stood with the 2 phones glowing, and the folder open and, somewhere under the sunburn, colour coming up that had nothing to do with the lake. Call Hollis back, Della said. Not to put me in front of anyone. To put this in front of someone, the appointment that you don't remember agreeing to, the flag on the page, the coffee misses, Okafor carried, and now a coercion offered in writing by the woman who claims she's the steady hand. You don't fight her review by holding me up to the light. You fight it by turning the light on her. She picked up his phone and put it in his hand and closed his fingers around it. The second time in 9 months she had crossed the 6 inches on purpose, and felt him go still at the contact and not pull away. Then, when it's done, when she can't touch Posey, and she can't touch you, then we'll have the other conversation, the one where you asked me what I think this is. I'll answer it. I promise. I'll answer it. But not while there's a letter dated 3 days out with a child's name in it. I can't hear my own heart over that. He looked down at the phone in his hand, then at her face, and the loud old man under the careful one came all the way up to the surface. Hollis, he said into the phone, not taking his eyes off her. Change of plan. We're not defending. We're going to ask a few questions about how a man who breeds horses in 2 countries ended up between me and my daughter. And I want you to look very closely at a stack of papers I signed under little paper flags 8 months ago, because I have a witness who carried the coffee that morning and remembers whose hand moved the flag. A breath. And Hollis, I'm going to send you some text messages. Tell me if a person can put a thing like this in writing and still walk into a room and call me the one with poor judgment. The plan took the rest of the afternoon and most of the white-hot evening, and Della spent it doing the thing she was best at, which was not vanishing. She sat at the marble island where the cold pancakes had been, and she went through the foundation papers with Theo, page by page, while Mrs. Okafor brought iced tea sweating in tall glasses and corrected 2 dates from memory. And Posey woke from her nap and was installed in the sunroom with the beehive jar and a solemn commission to keep the leaf from being frightened, and the cicadas wound down as the sun went long and gold over the lake, and the heat finally broke into the kind of summer evening that smells of cut grass and warm stone and someone's charcoal 3 docks down. By the time the light went amber on the water they had it, not a weapon to swing, Della kept saying, a record to show. The date of Stephen Brandt's appointment, the stack, the flags, the housekeeper who carried the coffee, and the message, the long pale message, in which a frightened woman had written down the whole machine of what she wanted, time-stamped, in grey letters that did not care how good her perfume was. She'll come, Theo said. He stood at the island with his thumb at the inside of his wrist. When Hollis's office sends the request to review Stephen's appointment, she won't wait for Thursday. She'll come up the drive with the code her. He stopped. Started again. Plainer, with the code Marielle gave her, and she'll want to do it on the terrace where she likes to do things. Then let her come, Della said. And this time I'm in the room. She came the next morning, before the coffee again, as though she had a clock set to the family's worst hours. Della heard the engine, and then the front doors, and then the heels, sharp across the swallowing stone, sharper than before, which told you the steadiness had a crack running through it now. Posey looked up from her toast, and her whole small body went careful, and Della put a hand flat on the warm crown of her head. Eat your toast, troublemaker, she said. Grown-ups are going to use their big voices in a minute. You don't have to listen to any of it. Tell the Leaf a story instead. He's new. He doesn't know how the house works yet. He knows naps are non-negotiable, Posey said. I told him. Then he's ahead of most people. Go on. Camille came into the kitchen in pale linen. No glasses today. Her eyes uncovered, and her sister's, all the lines present and the warmth filed off, and she had a thin leather folder under her arm and a face arranged into something reasonable. She took in the scene, the child sliding off her stool and drifting half behind the nanny, Theo standing at the island with his sleeves rolled, the housekeeper at the sink not pretending to be busy. Frankly, Camille began. I'd hoped we could, don't, Theo said. Not loud. It stopped her anyway. You don't get the first word in my kitchen anymore, Camille. You've had it for 2 years. Sit down. She did not sit down. She set the leather folder on the marble island and slid it so it spun a half-turn and stopped, the way she'd spun her phone the morning before. A woman who liked an object on the board between her and the person she'd come to move. "I came up here to help you," she said. "Stephen's office had a notice this morning that someone is asking questions about a perfectly routine appointment. Do you have any idea how that looks? A widower, unstable, suddenly litigious about his late wife's own foundation. Weeks after photographs of him on a carousel with the staff, Marielle gave you the gate code," Theo said, "and you have spent 2 years deciding that was the same as giving you the house." He picked up the leather folder without opening it and set it aside, off the board. On the counter where Camille had set Posey's plate the morning before, a man learning at last where things get set down. "You're not going to talk about how it looks. We're going to talk about how it is." Della took her phone from her apron pocket and laid it on the marble, face up, the grey waves glowing. She did not slide it. She set it down square. Camille looked at it. The reasonable arrangement of her face held for 1 breath. 2. And then the colour went out of it the way it had on the terrace, except this time the dark glasses were up in her hair and there was nowhere for it to go. "You wrote it down," Della said, gently, which was worse than loud. "Every word. The review you'd make ugly. The review you'd make disappear. The reference on real paper. The settlement. Be gone by Friday. No scene." She let it sit in the swallowing room. "I read a room before it can read me, Mrs. Brandt. It's my best quality. You told me so yourself. Clever mouth, good timing. You were so certain of the kind of girl I am that you put a coercion in writing and sent it to the help. And the help kept it." "That is private correspondence," Camille said, and the steadiness had the crack right through it now, audible, between 2 adults. "It proves nothing except that I tried to spare this family it proves the steady one's handwriting." Theo said it quietly, and it landed the way the terrace truth had landed, the cream going out. "That's the whole case, Camille, not the carousel. Not the nanny. You've spent 2 years telling a board and a cousin, and anyone who'd hold still, that I lost the thread, that my judgment couldn't be trusted, that the warm thing in my cold house was proof. And the morning you needed to make it stick, you put your own thread in writing and mailed it to the one person you were sure would take a door and be grateful." He let a breath out. "Hollis has it now. He also has the date Stephen was made a co-trustee, and a question about how a man got there. And he has Mrs. Okafor, who carried the coffee the morning you set the stack in front of me and told me not to trouble my poor unsteady head to read a word. The housekeeper at the sink dried her hands on a towel, unhurried. I remember the flags were yellow, she said, to the window, to no one. Little yellow flags. You moved one from the wrong page to the right one, and said, 'There, Theo. Just there.' I've a very good memory for where things are set down. It's most of the job." Camille looked from the housekeeper to the phone, to the man, and for a moment, the room was only the refrigerator humming and dropping a fistful of ice into its tray, and the cicadas starting up outside, and a 4-year-old in the sunroom explaining naps to a leaf. "You don't understand what I was protecting," she said at last, and the voice that came out was not the poured cream voice. It had a rasp in it, something with a flaw under it. "She was my sister. That foundation has her name on the door. Her name, and you were going to." She stopped, pressed her lips, started over. Lower, you stopped saying her name. Did you notice that? 2 years, and you stopped saying it, and then one summer you've got colour in your face, and you're on a carousel, and the child's laughing, and nobody in this house says Marielle anymore. Somebody had to hold what's left of her. Somebody had to. It was the closest the room had come to the truth all morning, and Della watched Theo hear it, watched it cost him something, watched the loud old man and the careful new one stand together inside him for a second. "You didn't hold her, Camille," he said, and there was no cruelty in it, which was why it was the worst thing he could have said. "You held her things. You counted the silver on your way out for 11 years and called it love because it was easier than the other kind. And when she was gone, you finally had the silver and no one to count it in front of. So you built a fortress out of her name and told a grieving man it was a garden." His thumb left his wrist. He did not press it. I will say her name in this house every day for the rest of my life. I'll say it to Posey until she's tired of hearing it, but I am not going to let you keep my daughter inside a fortress and call it her mother's wishes. Marielle gave money away faster than the men in suits could keep up. She'd have despised what you built with her name on it. Camille's mouth opened. Nothing came. And Della, who had been bracing all morning for the clever woman to find the next move, watched her not find it. Watched the machine she'd run for 2 years stop turning. Because the one part she'd counted on, the help who took the door, had set a phone down square on the marble instead. Here is how it goes, Theo said. And now it was the plain, flat voice she knew. The one that had said, I hope they do on a boardwalk, in the smell of fried dough. You withdraw the request for review, today, in writing, while Hollis watches. Stephen resigns the trusteeship he never earned, and the foundation goes back to a board that would have made Marielle proud, instead of comfortable. You give back the code. And you may see Posey. She's your niece. She loved you once, before she learned to go careful when your heels hit the floor. You may see her here, in this house, when you're invited, the way family is invited. Not with a code. Not at the worst hour of the morning. Invited. And if I don't, Camille said. But it was not a threat anymore. It came out thin. A woman feeling for a rail in the dark. Then Hollis files all of it, Della said. And a room of people who decide things reads your text messages instead of mine. And the woman who came here to talk about somebody's judgment gets to explain her own. You said custody is an ugly word over lunch. So is coercion. So is undue influence on a grieving man. She softened it, because she could afford to now, because the floor had come back under her feet. You don't want that room any more than we do, Mrs. Brandt. Nobody in this kitchen wants a single thing read out in a room. We want a summer. That's all. We just want a summer with the child in it. For a long moment, Camille Brandt stood in the hard white light with her sister's eyes and no glasses to hide behind, and Della watched her do the arithmetic she was so good at. The same arithmetic she'd done 8 months ago, and arrived this time at a sum that did not come out in her favor. She reached into her bag, and her hand was not quite steady. Della catalogued it. The family tell. The thing that ran in the blood of these people who held very still, so nothing would spill. And she took out a small brass key on a ring and set it on the marble, and the sound it made was tiny and final. The code's on it, she said. I changed it myself, after I thought. She didn't finish. She looked once at the sunroom door, where a small voice was still patiently instructing a leaf, and something moved across her filed-down face that might, in a different woman, in a different life, have grown into the warm kind of love. Tell her I said to eat her vegetables, she said, and it came out almost human. Then the dark glasses came down off her hair like a visor, and she gathered the thin leather folder Theo had set off the board, and her heels went sharp across the swallowing stone, and the great front doors opened and shut, and the engines started in the drive, and then it was just the kitchen, and the ice dropping, and the cicadas, and the 3 of them, and a housekeeper, and a key on the marble. Mrs. Okafor picked up the key, looked at it, and put it in her apron pocket as though confiscating a toy. I'll have the gate code changed by noon, she said. Something she can't guess. Her birthday, perhaps. She'd never think anyone remembered it. She headed for the hall, then paused at the door, dry as the iron. He read the page, she said to Della, with the ghost of something at the corner of her mouth. 11 years. I never thought I'd see it. You're a bad influence, Miss Hart. Keep it up. And she went. Then it was only the 2 of them, and the warm wrecked kitchen, and the white morning going gold at the edges, and the thing Della had promised to answer standing between them where the phone had been. Posey, Theo called, gently, not looking away from Della. Troublemaker, go ask Mrs. Okafor if the Leaf's allowed outside for 10 minutes. Supervised, he's been very brave. I think he's ready for the dock. He's scared of the lake, Posey said, appearing in the doorway with the beehive jar held in 2 hands. So am I, Theo said. We'll be scared together. Go on. I need to talk to Della about something important. Is it about kissing? Posey asked, with the terrible clarity of the very young, and Della made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else entirely, and Mrs. Okafor's voice came down the hall, Posey Lang. Leave the grown-ups their dignity, and bring me that jar. And the child went, and the kitchen was quiet. Theo crossed the marble and stopped at the 6 inches, and then, for the first time in 9 months, he crossed them himself, and stood close enough that she could see the sunburn at his collar and smell the warm cotton clean of the shirt Mrs. Okafor had pressed. "I tried to spend you," he said. "Yesterday, in front of the board. You said I decided and I didn't ask. And you were right, and I've been sick about it since. So I'm asking now. Not the board's question, not what's best for her, though God knows you are. My question." His thumb did not go to his wrist. He let his hands be still on their own. "You said somewhere in the last 9 months you forgot to keep the receipt. I'd like to know what you meant." "I think I know. I'd like to be wrong out loud, in front of you, instead of right and quiet, on a terrace in the dark." Della looked at the man who had read the page. The morning light voice was no use to her here. She set it down, the tray, the whole careful balance of it. "I meant that I stopped working here a long time ago," she said. "I mean, I do the job. The job is real. But I stopped doing it to buy months. I caught myself making the burned pancake on purpose, because she likes the burned one, and it has nothing to do with being useful. It's just that I want her to have the things she likes. And I caught myself out here at night, wanting to hear what you weren't drinking to forget. And that's not in the contract Pearson read twice." Her voice held. I forgot to keep the receipt. That's what I meant. I let myself want to stay somewhere, which is the one thing I swore I'd never do again, because the last time I did it I was 9 and they needed the room. "Stay," Theo said. "You have to mean it the right way." She made herself say it, the whole of it, the lie out loud where the light could get at it. Not because Posey cries at closing doors. Not because the house is warm now, and I'm the warm thing in it. Camille said you'd confused 2 kinds of love, and she had it backwards, but she wasn't wrong that there are 2 kinds, and I have spent my whole life being kept for my use. I would rather leave this beautiful house and pack the bag one more time than be kept for my use by the one person She stopped. The word was right there. The subtext was failing her. She let it. Della. He said her name like it was the whole sentence, the way he had on the dock. I stood on that terrace every night for 2 summers, because I couldn't be in a room that had her absence in it, and then one night I came out and you'd followed me with a strawberry to give my hands something honest to do, and I stopped going out there to grieve and started going out there hoping you'd come find me. That's not use. I don't need a nanny. I could hire 40. I need the woman who taught me to crouch down to my own daughter's eye level without ever telling me she was teaching me anything. I want the one who said people will think we're dating." A breath. "I told you I hoped they would. I've never said a truer thing in my life, and I've decided to only say true ones." The lake threw light through the windows. Out on the dock she could hear, faintly, a 4-year-old introducing a leaf to the water, and a housekeeper saying something dry, and a gull arguing with the morning. "People will absolutely think we're dating," Della said. And her voice cracked right down the middle of the joke, the plank laid over water, finally just water. "There'll be more photographs. There'll be a worse caption. The board, the lunch crowd, the whole, let them," Theo said. "Let them put it in their minutes. I'll send the gossip account a strawberry." And there it was, the joke, the real one, the second one of his entire careful life, landing clumsy and astonished out of a man who'd been raised not to touch the tool. And Della laughed, wet and helpless, and crossed the last of the no inches at all, and put one warm hand flat against his cheek, the way a child had taught her, the way you check if something is real. It was real. She let it be real. She let herself, at 29, in the most beautiful house she had ever stood inside, be a thing that was wanted and not merely used, and the floor held, and the floor went on holding. The summer did what summers do. It got hotter, and then it broke into August, and the lake stayed warm into the long gold evenings, and one Saturday Theo Lang walked down the warm grey boards of his own dock in a pair of swim trunks he had clearly owned for a decade and not worn, with the back of his neck finely tanned instead of burned, and he stood at the edge, where the water slapped the pilings, and the smell of it came up, green and mineral, and he held out his hand to a 4-year-old who had been waiting 2 summers without knowing it. "It's cold," Posey warned him. "I told the leaf. Cold is better for brave things." "Then, we're in luck," Theo said, "because I'm feeling very brave," and he stepped off the dock into the lake holding his daughter, and she shrieked with the particular joy of cold water, and Della sat on the warm boards with her feet in the lake, and watched the man who had not taken his child into the water in 2 summers, going up to his shoulders, with her laughing on his back, and she did not press down on the thing lifting in her chest. She let it lift. There was a floor under it now. "He'll catch a chill," said Mrs. Okafor, settling onto the dock with a tray of cut strawberries in a paper boat, because some jokes become rituals if you let them, and I'll be the one with the aloe and the tea, same as always. 11 years and nobody in this family has ever once listened to me about the water. She set the boat between them. The strawberries smelled green and sharp, and of the whole summer at once. He's singing again, you know. 6 in the morning. Terribly. I'd forgotten how terribly. She did not look at Della when she said it, which was how Della knew it was the truest thing the woman had said all year. "Whatever you did, Miss Hart, keep doing it." "I read the page," Della said. Mrs. Okafor ate a strawberry. "So you did." The beehive jar lived on the sunroom sill, the leaf long since released back into the garden with full honors, the jar kept anyway, because Posey had decided it was the leaf's house, and a house should be kept even when the brave thing has gone out into the world. There were more photographs, as promised, a worse one, a better caption. "Billionaire A and his nanny, or is she?" And Theo had looked at it over breakfast and said, plainly, she's not, anymore. She gave her notice. I have it in writing, and slid Della the resignation letter she'd written and he'd refused to accept, and they'd framed instead. As a joke, the only resignation in the world that meant the opposite of leaving. On the last warm evening of the season, they stood at the stone rail above the lake. The 6 inches gone for good, and the dark water moved below, carrying the smell of weed and water and somebody's far-off charcoal. And the lights of the houses lay down on the water like dropped coins. And a small voice from an open window behind them demanded to know whether ponies dreamed, and was assured by a housekeeper that they did. Of strawberries, and to go to sleep. "You came out here to grieve," Della said, "and started coming out here hoping I'd find you. And now you're already here," Theo said, "so I don't know what the terrace is for anymore." "This," she said, and leaned her shoulder into his in the warm dark, and he turned his wrist over on the rail, not to press the soft inside of it where a watch would sit, not to hold anything still, just to take her hand. Openly, the way a man does when he has decided to only do true things, and let the whole bright summer world think exactly what it likes. Out on the lake a heron lifted, slow and prehistoric, white against the last of the light, and flew on down the bright edge of the water as if it knew the way, and behind them the house was warm, and stayed warm, and a little girl slept in a room the color of the inside of a shell with one hand open on the pillow, waiting, even in sleep, to be put against a cheek and told that something was real. It was. It stayed real. And that, in the most beautiful house above the most ordinary summer lake, was the whole of it. If this story warmed something in you, if you believe the lonely deserve to be found and the underestimated deserve to be chosen, then stay a while with us here at Platinum Diaries. Like this story, leave a comment and tell me who you were rooting for, and subscribe so the next love story finds its way to you the moment it begins. Until then, be well, be kind, and keep your own light on. Someone is always closer to finding it than they know.